and I was able to take advantage of them. There was an American elm that we had grown from seed, and I tried to make a formal upright out of it. And at that point I was doing it, out of the book, literally. Read the book at night, go in the next morning and try to, do what I had been reading about. So I read about formal upright style, right? You take an elm and cut it off, and then sprouts come out, and you shape those sprouts. Well, sometimes it works that way, and sometimes it doesn't, right? And I found that out first thing. Sometimes it doesn't work so neatly. But I kept working with it, struggling with it, and I finally built something that looked kind of tree-like, and I got it into a bonsai pot, but it was always dissatisfying. It always looked wrong somehow. I'd look at it and say, what's wrong with that tree, I gave it its shape, and its shape is wrong. What did I do wrong? And I'd look in the book again, what did I got? A first branch. I got my second branch a little bit higher up into the opposite side. I got a back branch, and I'm following the pattern of the tree. How come my tree is not good in my eyes? And I realized one day I was looking at it, I said, well, because it doesn't really look like a tree. It is a tree, but it doesn't look like one. It looks like a caricature, Like if I were to draw a picture of Harold, right? I would exaggerate certain things and do it real quick and loose and everything. There's Harold, right? But if Harold sat next to it, you'd say, that's not quite Harold, It's kind of like an interpretation of Harold, and it's a little wrong in certain places. Yeah, that's how this tree was. It was like, I recognize it's supposed to be a tree, but it doesn't really look like one. Well, what I wound up doing with that was air layering the branches, right? Those of you who don't know what an air layer is, you'll find out soon enough. It's a very convenient way to make new material to work on, right? If you want to get things that you can work on, you don't want to start with all just little seedlings, you can take a branch like this that maybe has a little shape and development in it, and you can actually force it to grow roots of its own and then sever it and grow it in its own pot. Right? And then you've got this little head start on a nice tree. And I did that and took off four branches that were about like this, as I remember it. So I took the big tree that wasn't satisfying, and I took off 4 of the branches, and I put that unsatisfying tree in the compost pile so it could be on its way to the next incarnation. And then I took those 4, and 3 of them I put in pots and grew separately, and the 4th one I put in the ground, right? These are the 3 that went into the pots. This one was a little bit bigger to begin with, and I grew it more aggressively, right? Gave it more room to spread out, let it keep more of its stuff as I was developing it, right? Everything to favor its growth and development. The other 2 I kind of rode the brake on, developed them, but didn't allow them to get a whole lot bigger. They will get bigger anyway as time goes by, even though you don't see it necessarily until you look at an old photo and you recognize, oh, look how much bigger that is. It does happen, even in a pot, just much slower. Over time, you'll build up trunk size and branch development, hopefully, right? And then the day came when I thought, put them together now into a group. And this is the group. Okay, as I was growing them, my idea about how to shape them was evolving, was changing. And what I started to do, maybe unconsciously at first and then very consciously, was to stop going back to the same reference points, which was the book in the magazine. I can't tell you how many hours I would spend at night after work. Laying in bed, looking at these pictures. Most of the books were written in Japanese, so I couldn't tell what they said anyway. I was just looking at images, right? Studying how these things were built, and then trying to copy it. And I stopped doing that. I started looking less and less, right? Not like, get thee away from me, evil thing. No, it was more like, God, that's getting tired. I'm not so interested in that anymore. What am I interested in? Hey, I step outside and there's a tree. I look at it. You know what? I've been looking at that tree for years. It's still interesting to me. I must like trees. I go out and look around. Look at them. They're everywhere, right? Even the young ones show us something. They all have something to teach you about how they grow, about how they look. You're out walking in the park or whatever, you see a tree, and you say, man, that's a nice looking tree. Stop right there. Why is it a nice looking tree? What makes it interesting? Right? What about that tree drew your attention? If you can identify that, then there's a chance that when you go back and do your bonsai work, you can get a little bit of that into your tree. Right? Instead of, when you reach the point where a decision's to be made, you think, yeah, what did that picture in the magazine show? Oh yeah, you do this. When you do it that way, it's like cooking from the cookbook. There's nothing wrong with cooking from the cookbook. Most of us can't cook otherwise, right? Tell me how to do it. Give me step by step by step, and I can do it. But here, you close the cookbook, and you go on experience. This is what I like. This is what I don't like. Works both ways. You go out and you see a tree, and you say, man, that's an ugly tree. Why is it ugly? What makes it ugly? How come you enjoy looking at that one and not at that one? And when you stop and think about these things, you suddenly find that many of the reference points that you're taught in bonsai, how to shape trees, actually relate to that same thing. It relates to composition, right? It relates to how the different elements of the tree come together to create the image that they do. And so you come to realize, well, why don't I want opposite branches? I can see opposite branches of trees out in the woods all the time. Why don't I want them? Well, because when you have one, it's hard not to look right at the intersection. Your eye keeps getting stuck there. So it creates a static part of a composition that's supposed to be dynamic. Oh, so there's a reason for that rule. It's not like you do it because it's a rule. It's a rule because there was good sense in it. And when you start flipping it like that and seeing it from the other side, then you realize, like, oh, a lot of that stuff is very useful. We don't throw out the baby with the bathwater. There's a lot of really good information in the way that we typically learn bonsai. But there are places where you can say, you know, I know that's how it's supposed to be done, but I think I might like to try it this way. Or I saw a tree that had this, which is definitely wrong from a bonsai point of view, but as a tree it looked really great. Let me see if I can do that in the bonsai. This tree, this arrangement, all of the trees, are grown just that way. Grown just that way. I'm a little reluctant because, you know, there are new people here, and I don't want to poison you. You're just starting out. I give you these bad ideas, and then all the subsequent guests to the club will have to fix them. All right? But I'm going to tell you anyway, because it's all I know anymore. I come here, I sing the same song every year, right? That's why, you know, like Steve's not here and Ed's not here. It's like, oh, him again? It's going to be about naturalism, right? My last two programs here were slideshow programs about naturalism. Well, here it is in the flesh, acted out. Why is this naturalism? Because the way these are shaped, the way they're arranged, is drawn from personal experience. It's crossbred with all that formal learning, but it also has to do with my own observation about how trees grow. How do trees grow? What is the main principle behind every tree growing out there in terms of how it shapes itself? Does it shape itself? Yes?
To be most advantageous to the sun.
That's exactly right. To put it more simply and not use big words like advantageous, wow, great. Trees grow to the sun to the extent that they can. Why do they do that? Well, because they need the sun as part of the biological process that keeps them alive. They have to have access to the sun. If they don't have that, they grow weak, which makes them more susceptible to insects and disease, or they fail altogether. They have to have their place in the sun. What happens when trees grow together? They race up. They race up. Because the one who gets up first gets the leg up on the others, right? You get sun, you live. You don't get sun, you die. Now, they don't think of it like that, right? But that is exactly how they're operating. Trees, plants in general, are less sophisticated organisms than we are. We walk around thinking about things and having feelings and such, you know, and changing our mind and getting upset about stuff. Trees don't do any of that. They don't have the capacity to do that. Well, the question I get asked by lots of non-bonsai people, oh, doesn't that hurt them? I don't know. I don't think so. If it does, they can't tell me about it. If it does, it must work on some principle other than our system. We have a central nervous system. Trees don't have that. Right? They are simpler organisms. And so the way they operate is simpler. And one of the basic tenets of their survival is get sun. Another one, get moisture. Right? What are the roots doing? They're seeking moisture. Always. That's why they grow. They grow to get more moisture. They grow upwards above the ground to get more sun. A big tree falls on another tree, breaks it down. Is that the end? Possibly, but possibly not. Now, some part of it, all right, here's a tree, right? That big tree falls on it, does this. All right? This part is done. This part that's aiming down to the ground has very little hope. This part, which used to be a branch, is now going up. Guess what it'll do? It'll take over as the new top. It'll start growing that way because it has the best chance of getting to the sun. This other part that used to be the top, it might hang on. Parts from it might start growing up too. The new up, right? There's a new up in town. And the one that has the best location to take advantage of it, it takes off and becomes the new leader of the tree. And this principle plays out in large and small ways over and over and over and over again throughout the tree's life. Look at a young tree. What does it look like? It looks like a stick coming out of the ground with a green mass on it, right? Young trees look similar to the way children draw trees, like lollipops.